Jay Silverheels was the first Native American ever to play a native character on television, so immediately he became a groundbreaking figure in history. Jay Silverheels gained immense fame because of his character in The Lone Ranger. Behind the scenes, however, things are far from perfect. When someone asked him about his most famous role in 1957, his response included only 3 striking words: "Tonto is stupid." But that wasn't the only painful truth hidden behind his success. He earned half of what his white co-star was paid, and at one point, a director tried to physically assault him on set. The name Tonto held a meaning that followed him into old age. Today, we will share with you the truth about the man who seemed cheerful on camera but suffered silently. Jay Silverheels was born Harold J. Smith on May 26, 1912, at the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve near Hagersville, Ontario. He came from a large Mohawk family, one of at least 10 children living together in a small home. His father, Alexander George Edwin Smith, was a Cayuga War hero who had earned the Military Cross for bravery during World War I at the Second Battle of Arras. But after the war, he returned home deeply scarred, his hearing damaged by artillery, stuck working on a farm, and surviving on only $49 a month from the Canadian government. His medals couldn't feed the family, and his injuries never healed. Harold saw him suffer daily from headaches and hearing loss. The burden fell to his mother, Mabel, part Mohawk and part Seneca, to keep the household together. Doctors refused to treat them, so she relied on traditional medicine. The family had very little. What they did have came from the land, from trading, and from herbal remedies. Their lives were surrounded by poverty from the very beginning. By the time Harold was 5, his natural athleticism was already evident. He ran in local lacrosse games on the reserve and showed incredible speed. At age 19, he started to play professional box lacrosse for the Toronto Tecumsehs under the name Harry Smith. He didn't travel alone. His cousins and brothers, known as Porky, Beef, and Chubby respectively, were all with him playing and touring through Buffalo, Rochester, and Atlantic City. In the 1930s, they played almost continuously, earning money, escaping poverty, and gaining a reputation. It was during one of these games that Harold earned the nickname Silverheels after sprinting past a defender so fast, it looked as if his shoes gleamed like silver. The name stuck, newspapers picked it up, and fans went to watch games especially to see him run. In one season, he scored more than 4 goals per game, and coaches had to assign 2 defenders to guard him. But success on the field didn't mean freedom from the discrimination of the time. Harold grew up during the era when Canada's residential schools were erasing Indigenous languages and traditions. At Six Nations, students caught speaking Mohawk were beaten, or made to eat soap, or strapped. Harold's sister went through one of those schools and can barely speak her own language fluently today. Laws banning ceremonies, suppressing spirituality, and silencing Indigenous culture tore families apart. Government officials called them lazy, incapable of progress labels that hung from reports, everyday speech, right down to how people treated them. When the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, Harold's family, like so many others, fell deeper into poverty. They eventually moved to Buffalo, where Harold took on whatever work he could find: farm labor, odd jobs, anything that paid. His father, despite his wartime heroism, could barely move without pain, and his mother often traded away family heirlooms just to buy food. Government rations were frequently spoiled. Harold watched his parents sacrifice everything simply to keep the lights on. The pain of poverty wasn't just physical, it made people feel invisible. But Harold was nothing if not persistent. His skill on a lacrosse field made heads turn. In 1932, he turned professional for $75 a game, a small fortune in Depression times. During one game in Montreal, things got ugly, and a fight ensued in which punches thrown by Harold earned him a suspension. But when he came back, attendance tripled. People came to see him, controversy and all. He made headlines and kept playing. Soon after, he decided to take up boxing. As a middleweight, Harold joined the Golden Gloves tournament at Madison Square Garden. He made his way into the semifinals before taking a powerful punch that fractured both sides of his jaw. The boxing career thus came to an end with that injury, but the prize money kept him surviving for quite some time. Having to live on a liquid diet, he lost almost 25 pounds, yet never gave up. The experience had taught him how to endure pain and keep moving. During a 1937 tour of Los Angeles with his lacrosse team, Harold was discovered at Gilmore Stadium by comedian Joe E. Brown, who engaged him as an extra in the film for a diving catch that called for bravery. The scene took 11 takes. Harold was paid $150, twice as much as he had ever made playing lacrosse. That changed everything. He joined the Screen Actors Guild, adopted the name of Jay Silverheels, and by year's end had appeared in 5 films. Though he wasn't yet famous, he had officially broken into Hollywood. Still, the industry offered no luxury. Jay worked as a stuntman for less than $20 a day and waited tables at night to make ends meet. In 1939, he finally landed a significant part in Drums Along the Mohawk, which paid $350 per week, the highest pay of his life so far. Studios liked the sound of Silverheels and told him to keep it, calling it exotic. He continued to take small roles, often unnamed native characters. Casting directors often required him to strip to the waist for auditions, regarding him as an exhibit. They were more concerned with his body than with his performance. He took the humiliation and remained professional learning his lines, earning work. By 1941, Jay had landed a speaking role. By then, he had appeared in more than 15 films, almost never with credit, often described as Indian Scout or Warrior Number 2. Still, he persisted. One friend assured him, "If you can read Shakespeare, you can read anything." So he studied the playwright's works, though he wasn't sure at first they were meant for him. Jay served in World War II, although his service records are limited. In 1945, he returned to Hollywood with a new name, Jay Silvers. But the movie world hadn't changed. Native American actors were still being replaced with white performers wearing dark makeup, and the few roles out there were deeply stereotypical. In 1946, he auditioned for Captain from Castile, starving himself so the costume would fit. As usual, the director made him remove his shirt for inspection. The experience was degrading, but Jay accepted the job. The film failed financially, but provided him steady work. Even when he had speaking lines, his name didn't appear in the credits. It was during a lacrosse team road trip through the South that Jay first encountered open racism. Loud, direct, impossible to tune out. Hotels turned him away. Restaurants wouldn't serve him. He slept on buses while his white teammates got rooms. Once in Louisville, police threatened him just for using a bathroom marked whites only. These weren't rare events. They were constant. That's why later in life, when he finally had a platform in Hollywood, he used it to fight for better roles and representation. A decade passed before anyone really noticed him. That changed in 1948 when director John Huston cast him in Key Largo alongside Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Beale. Jay played Tom Osceola, a seminal fugitive. Finally, a credited role in a major studio film. They shot it on the Warner Brothers back lot in Burbank for 78 days, building Florida in a controlled environment to keep costs low. But for Jay, it meant climbing out of the shadows. No longer just another name lost in the credits. 2 years later, in 1950, Jay was cast in Broken Arrow, a Western that claimed to be progressive but couldn't quite let go of old habits. He played Geronimo, a strong role, but not the lead. That went to Jeff Chandler, a white actor from Brooklyn wearing dark makeup to portray Coochies. Even in a film that tried to present Native Americans more fairly, Hollywood couldn't bring itself to let Native actors lead. Real Apache people were hired as background extras from the Fort Apache Reservation. Jay, a Canadian Mohawk, gave Geronimo dignity, but the contradiction wasn't lost on anyone. Then came the moment that changed his life and TV history. In 1949, when a Lone Ranger came to ABC, Silvers beat out 35 other actors to become Tonto. It aired on September 15th. For the first time, a Native American played a Native American character on television. For 2 decades, the radio version of Tonto had been voiced by white men like John Todd and Roland Parker. Even when TV producers considered casting a Native actor, they hesitated. One was fired for refusing to speak in broken English. They went back to John Todd before finally giving Jay the job. At the time, Hollywood's standard was to paint Italian actors with Armenia bull red clay to make them look native enough. Jay's casting broke that mold. He wasn't supposed to win the part, but he did, and it changed everything. There was always a problem with the name. Tonto means fool or stupid in Spanish. Silverheels knew it. He lived with it. Publicly, he smiled. Privately, he resented it. In 1957, during a visit to his home reserve in Ontario, someone asked him about his famous role. His answer was quick. Tonto is stupid. That was all he said, just 3 words. But behind those words was a decade of quiet frustration. The name stuck through the decades, even as Native American groups pointed out its offensiveness. When Johnny Depp played Tonto in 2013, the controversy returned. Nothing had changed, and it wasn't just the name. Jay had a reputation for never reading his lines. Not because he was lazy, but because the lines were often bad, stiff, broken English written to sound authentic. So he'd ad-lib. He'd make it up. Me wait here. You go into town. That right. The phrases stuck. Directors were furious. Alan Dinhard remembered how one director, Wilhelm Tila, went red with rage and had to be physically held back from attacking Jay on set in 1955. But Clayton Moore, the Lone Ranger himself, defended his co-star. Let play, he'd say. It sounds more natural. Jay had a point. He knew how people really spoke, but Hollywood didn't want that. They wanted a stereotype, and he was forced to deliver it. Behind the scenes, things weren't much better. The budget for each episode was only $12,500, so corners were cut. Jay and Moore didn't even have proper dressing rooms in the beginning. They had to change clothes in a gas station restroom down the road. The heat on location was brutal, especially in Chadsworth, where the suede and wool costumes turned into ovens. Jay had enough. One day he refused to dress, just stood there waiting. Moore warned him that delaying the shoot could cost jobs, but Jay wouldn't budge. The next day, private dressing rooms appeared. It was a small win, but it meant something. Jay could have just accepted the fame. He was a star now. The Lone Ranger was one of the top shows on TV. It ranked number 7 in Nielsen ratings for the 1950 to 551 season and stayed in the top 30 for years. Over 8 seasons, they made 221 episodes. But Jay never forgot the cost. He didn't like what Tonto had become. He didn't like being the sidekick who always spoke in broken sentences. He was fluent, articulate, sharp, but the show didn't let him be that. Then came a scare that stopped the show cold. In 1955, during a fight scene rehearsal, a stuntman fell onto Jay. Moore saw something was